The air in the Grand Hotel lobby was thick with the scent of floor polish, expensive perfume, and the low, expectant hum of 100 quiet conversations. It clung to the gilded columns and velvet ropes like a second skin. Outside, the November night was a shard of black glass, cold and sharp, but inside, chandeliers dripped light like liquid gold onto the polished marble. Men in crisp dress uniforms and women in elegant gowns moved with a practiced grace, their voices a soft murmur against the distant strains of a string quartet warming up in the ballroom. This was the annual Navy Ball, a night of tradition, honor, and carefully curated prestige. Near the imposing oak doors of the ballroom, a man stood alone. He was an island of stillness in a river of motion. His suit, a dark, simple wool, was impeccably clean but dated by at least 2 decades. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, and the cut was too generous, a relic from a time when comfort was not a sin. He was old, the kind of old that sinks into the bones, pulling the skin taut over a delicate framework of bird-like fragility. His hands, clasped loosely in front of him, were a roadmap of veins and sinew, yet they were unervingly steady. Not a tremor, not a twitch. His face was a mask of placid patience, his pale blue eyes holding a deep, quiet calm that seemed to absorb the light and noise around him, leaving only silence in their wake. He was Elias Thorne, and he was waiting. Lieutenant Commander K. Jennings saw him from across the lobby. Jennings moved through the crowd like a shark through shallow water. He was young, 32 at most, with a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite and a physique that strained the impeccable tailoring of his dress whites. His medals were few but polished to a blinding sheen, each one a testament to a career on a steep, fast trajectory. He radiated an aura of supreme confidence, the kind that comes from never having been truly tested and found wanting. To Jennings, the world was a simple hierarchy. There were winners and there were losers. There were the important and there were the invisible. And the old man by the door was definitively invisible. Worse, he was an eyesore, a smudge on the perfect portrait of the evening. Jennings adjusted his cuffs, his mind already churning with dismissive annoyance. Who let this relic in? This had to be a mistake. Some lost civilian who wandered in from the street, confused by the lights. He felt a surge of proprietary irritation. This was his event to manage, his checkpoint. He was in charge of the guest list, the seating, the security detail at the entrance. Every perfect detail was a reflection of him, and this old man was a glaring imperfection. He plastered on a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, a predator smile, and changed his course. His polished black shoes clicked with sharp authority on the marble floor, a sound that made heads turn. He stopped a precise 2 feet from the old man, invading his personal space just enough to establish dominance. "Evening," Jennings said, his voice a smooth baritone coated in condescension. "Can I help you find something? Perhaps the exit?" Elias Thorne did not startle. He simply tilted his head, his pale eyes lifting to meet Jennings's gaze. The calm in them was absolute, a deep, cold well that seemed to have no bottom. "I am here for the ball," he said. His voice was a low gravel, like stones rolling in a slow tide. It was quiet, yet it carried a strange weight. Jennings's smile tightened. The audacity. He let his eyes drift down, making a show of inspecting the old man's worn suit, the scuffed but clean shoes, the faint tremor of age in his neck that was absent from his hands. "The ball," Jennings repeated, drawing the words out. He let a small, cruel laugh escape. "I think you might be mistaken, sir. This is a private event. For members of the United States Navy." The implication was clear. "You are not one of us. You do not belong." From his post, near a velvet rope, Petty Officer Second Class Marco Diaz watched the exchange. Diaz was young, barely 20, assigned to the event staff. His job was simple: stand here, look sharp, and help direct guests. He had seen Lieutenant Commander Jennings all night, preening and posturing, his ego filling every room he entered. And he saw the old man. There was something about him, a stillness. Diaz's grandfather had that same stillness. He had been a Marine, fought in Korea. He rarely spoke of it, but when he did, his eyes would get that same distant, unreadable look. A look that said he had seen the end of the world and had walked back from it. Diaz felt a knot of unease tighten in his gut. This felt wrong. Elias simply nodded. I am aware. His lack of reaction was like throwing gasoline on the fire of Jennings's ego. The lieutenant commander expected deference, perhaps some flustered apology. He expected the old man to shrink, to be intimidated. This quiet dignity was infuriating. It was a challenge. Then you'll understand that I need to see your invitation and your identification, Jennings said, his voice losing its feigned politeness and taking on a hard, authoritative edge. This is a secure event. Elias's gaze did not waver. I was not issued an invitation. I was told my name would be sufficient. Jennings scoffed, a sharp, ugly sound. Your name? And who are you supposed to be? The ghost of John Paul Jones. A few nearby officers chuckled, eager to curry favor with the rising star. The circle of attention was widening. The low hum of conversation in the lobby began to falter as more people tuned into the confrontation. The air grew heavy. My name is Elias Thorne, the old man said, his voice still impossibly level. Jennings pulled out a tablet from a junior officer standing nearby. He swiped through the digital guest list with exaggerated, theatrical motions. Thorne, he muttered, his finger tracing down the screen. He stopped, a triumphant smirk spreading across his face. No Elias Thorne on the list. Not a guest. Not a +1. Not even on the catering staff. He held up the tablet as if it were a holy text. So, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Now, Elias did not move. He seemed rooted to the marble floor, a weathered oak in a field of saplings. The Admiral invited me personally, he stated, a simple fact offered without embellishment. He said to wait for him here. This was the final straw for Cade Jennings. The Admiral, Admiral Harrison, the guest of honor, the man whose approval could make or break a career like his. This senile old fool was not only trespassing, but he was also now name-dropping the most powerful man in the room. The insult was unbearable. The disrespect was monumental. Jennings's face flushed a deep, mottled red. His internal monologue was a scream of pure rage. This pathetic old man was trying to use the Admiral's name to get past him. He, who had spent weeks orchestrating this perfect evening. He, who had personally vetted every single name on this list. The Admiral? Jennings's voice dripped with venom. You think you can just drop Admiral Harrison's name, and I'll roll out the red carpet for you? Let me tell you something, old man. I work for the Admiral. I know his friends. I know his family. And you're not on that list. He stepped closer still, his chest puffed out, using his physical presence to try and intimidate. You are a liar and a fraud. Petty Officer Diaz flinched. The words were too cruel, too public. He saw the way other officers were looking on, some with smirks, others with a flicker of discomfort they quickly hid. But no one stepped in. No one challenged the lieutenant commander. Diaz felt his own duty warring with his conscience. He was supposed to support his superiors. But this was not leadership. This was bullying. Elias Thorne's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. A flicker of memory. A shadow of a different time, a different place, where disrespect had far more immediate consequences. He remembered the smell of jet fuel and jungle rot. The oppressive, wet heat of a sky that promised no rain. He is in a briefing tent, the air thick with the hum of a generator and the sweat of 20 men. A map is spread on the table, a mess of contour lines and red markings. A young captain, fresh from the academy, is pointing at a sector labeled the Serpent's Tooth. The captain's voice is crisp, arrogant. The approach will be conventional. Standard insertion. My men are the best. Elias, then a man in his prime, a shadow even in the light, speaks from the corner of the tent. His voice is the same gravel it is now. That valley is a kill box. Conventional is a death sentence. The captain turns, his face a mask of indignation. And who are you to question my strategy, Sergeant? You're just a ghost on the roster. The memory faded, leaving behind the cold echo of its lesson. Arrogance was a more dangerous enemy than any armed soldier. It was a blindness that led men to walk willingly into kill boxes. Back in the gilded lobby, Jennings was not finished. He was feeding on the crowd's attention now, performing for them. "Tell me," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you're such a big shot, such a friend of the Admiral, you must have done something special in your day. What was it? Peeled potatoes on a submarine? What was your call sign, old-timer? Pops? Or maybe Slowpoke?" The laughter this time was louder, more confident. The pack had turned. The old man was fair game. The term call sign hung in the air. For Jennings, it was a throwaway insult, a piece of military jargon used to mock. But for Elias, the word was a key. It unlocked a door in his mind, a door he kept bolted shut. He is falling. The sky is a screaming vortex of black and gray, ripped apart by tracer fire. The transport plane is a dying beast, groaning as its metal skin is torn open. He is not wearing a parachute. He is holding onto the skids of a crippled helicopter, the wind trying to tear him away. Below, a downed pilot is trapped in the cockpit of his burning jet. The radio in his ear is a cacophony of panic. We can't get to him. The whole area is hot. Abort! Abort! And then his own voice, calm amidst the chaos, a voice that cut through the static. "Negative. I'm going in. Hey, let's go." He falls toward the fire. A voice, filled with awe and disbelief, crackles over the net. My God, it's the Spectre. The memory was less than a second long, a flash of fire and falling, but it settled a profound stillness over him. He looked at the sneering face of Lieutenant Commander K. Jennings, and for the first time, he felt a faint stirring of something other than patience. It was not anger. It was pity. This boy knew nothing of the world. He knew nothing of the price of the uniform he wore with such pride. Petty Officer Diaz had heard enough. The word Spectre meant nothing to him, but the old man's eyes, they had changed. For a fleeting moment, they hadn't looked old at all. They had looked ancient, timeless, and dangerous. Diaz made a decision. He slipped away from his post, his heart pounding against his ribs. He walked quickly, purposefully, toward a service corridor, pulling his phone from his pocket. He had one number memorized, a number given to him by his own command master chief for absolute, dire emergencies only. Never use this unless someone is about to die or the Navy's honor is at stake, the master chief had warned. Diaz thought this qualified. He dialed. The phone was answered on the first ring. Yes, the voice was clipped, impatient. It was the Admiral's aide. "Sir, this is Petty Officer Diaz at the ball. There's a situation at the entrance. Lieutenant Commander Jennings is refusing entry to an elderly gentleman who says he was invited by the Admiral. The Admiral's entire guest list has been cleared." "What's the man's name?" the aide asked, his voice laced with annoyance. "Elias Thorne, sir," Diaz said, his own voice barely a whisper. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, profound silence that stretched for 5, then 10 seconds. Diaz thought the call had been dropped. Then the aide's voice came back, and all the annoyance was gone. It was replaced by something else. A cold, sharp panic. "Where's the Admiral's car?" the aide snapped. "Just pulling up to the main entrance, sir. Traffic was heavy. Keep in the car. Do not let him get out. Do you understand me, Petty Officer? Whatever it takes. Stall him." The line went dead. Back in the lobby, Jennings had reached his breaking point. The old man's silence was the ultimate act of defiance. It was a public refutation of his authority. He had to end this. He had to reassert control. "That's it. You're done," Jennings snarled, his face inches from Elias's. "You've harassed my guests, you've made a scene, and you've lied about knowing an admiral. You're a disgrace." He reached out and grabbed Elias Thorne's arm, his fingers digging into the thin fabric of the suit and the fragile muscle beneath. "I'm personally escorting you out, and then I'm having you cited for trespassing." It was the touch that crossed the line. The physical contact. Elias did not resist. He did not pull away, but his body went rigid, and the calm in his eyes was finally, irrevocably, replaced. It was replaced by a stillness so absolute it was terrifying. It was the stillness of a predator that has just been woken from a long sleep. The air in the lobby didn't just grow heavy. It solidified. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. The string quartet in the ballroom chose that exact moment to fall silent. And into that sudden, ringing silence came a new sound. The squeal of tires on pavement, sharp and violent. The sound of a car door being thrown open with such force it slammed against its stops. And then the great oak doors to the hotel were thrust open. They didn't swing. They exploded inwards, crashing against the walls. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the cold night, was a figure of pure, undiluted authority. 4 stars glittered on his shoulders. His face was a thundercloud of fury. Admiral Charles Harrison, Supreme Allied Commander, did not walk into the lobby. He stormed it. He was flanked by 2 grim-faced Marine guards in full dress uniform, but they struggled to keep pace. The Admiral's eyes, cold and blue like chips of ice, scanned the room for a fraction of a second before they locked onto the scene by the ballroom entrance. They saw his lieutenant commander, his hand gripping the arm of the old man. And the world stopped. Jennings froze. His hand was still on Elias's arm. His mouth hung slightly open. Confusion warred with terror on his face. What was happening? Why was the Admiral here? Why did he look like he was about to personally declare war? Admiral Harrison's gaze was a physical force. It swept over Kay Jennings with a contempt so profound it was almost visible, a wave of heat and disgust. But he did not speak to him. He did not even acknowledge his existence beyond that initial, withering glance. He marched across the marble floor, his steps so powerful and certain they seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea, a collective gasp rippling through the assembled officers. He did not stop until he was standing directly in front of Elias Thorne. He ignored the younger officer whose hand was still, stupidly, gripping the old man's arm. The 4-star admiral, one of the most powerful military men on the planet, looked at the frail, elderly man in the worn suit. His face, which had been a mask of rage, softened. The fury was replaced by a look of profound, absolute reverence. And then, in the dead silent lobby, Admiral Charles Harrison snapped his body to the most rigid, perfect position of attention he had ever held. His hand came up in a salute so sharp, so precise, it seemed to slice the air. "Mr. Thorne," the Admiral's voice boomed, thick with an emotion that no one in that room had ever heard from him before. "It is the highest honor of my life that you would accept my invitation. I apologize for my tardiness." He held the salute. Elias Thorne slowly, gently, raised his free hand and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of acceptance. It was the only permission the Admiral needed. Harrison dropped his salute, and his eyes, for the first time, fell upon Jennings. The full, unrestrained fury returned, magnified 100 times over. "Lieutenant Commander," he began, and his voice was no longer loud. It was a low, deadly whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "Get your hand off of him. Now." Jennings snatched his hand back as if he had been burned. He was pale, sweating, his mind utterly incapable of processing the reality of the situation. The Admiral was saluting this old man, calling him Mr., apologizing to him. It was impossible. It made no sense. Admiral Harrison turned his body slightly, addressing not just Jennings, but the entire silent, watching crowd. "For those of you who are wondering," he began, his voice ringing with the authority of command, "let me tell you who you have been the presence of this evening." He gestured toward Elias Thorne, not with a casual wave, but with a deliberate, respectful motion. This is Mr. Elias Thorne. He holds no rank. He wears no medals, because the rank he held was erased from the records, and the medals he earned are still classified at a level none of you will ever be clear to see. He took a step closer to Jennings, who visibly shrank back. "You asked for his call sign," the Admiral said, his voice dripping with ice. "You are not worthy to speak it, but I will tell you. In the darkest days of the Cold War, there was a unit that didn't officially exist. A ghost unit. They were sent to places that weren't on any map to do jobs that were deemed impossible. They had one operator who was the stuff of legends. A man they sent in when all hope was lost. A man who could disappear behind enemy lines for months, who could dismantle entire enemy operations single-handedly. The enemy didn't even know his name. They only knew the name they gave him. They called him Prizrak. The Admiral let the Russian word for ghost or specter hang in the air. We called him Spectre. A wave of shock and disbelief washed over the room. Spectre. It was a myth. A boogeyman story told to young intelligence officers. A name whispered in the halls of the Pentagon, always in the past tense. No one believed he was a real person. Admiral Harrison wasn't finished. His eyes were locked on Jennings, pinning him in place. "Let me tell you a story, Lieutenant Commander. 30 years ago, a nuclear submarine, the USS Triton, suffered a catastrophic failure and sank in the Barents Sea. Inside was a new stealth technology we could not allow the Soviets to recover. A recovery mission was impossible. The sub was too deep, the waters too hostile. It was a total loss." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "The President authorized a black operation. One man dropped into the Arctic water with experimental gear. His mission was to infiltrate the sunken sub, retrieve the core technology, and destroy the reactor to prevent recovery. A one-way trip. A suicide mission." The Admiral took another step, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every person in the lobby could hear it, as if he were screaming in their ear. "That man spent 72 hours in the crushing dark, 2 miles beneath the ice. He fought off Soviet divers who had located the wreck. He retrieved the core, and he set the charges. But he didn't die. He used the explosion to propel himself to the surface, and then he swam for 12 miles in freezing water to a pickup point that was little more than a prayer." He pointed a trembling finger at Elias Thorne. "That man was him. He saved a technological advantage that kept us safe for 20 years. And his reward was to have his name, his rank, his entire existence erased from history for the sake of national security. He was asked to become a ghost so that we could sleep safely at night." The Admiral now turned his full, undivided attention to Cade Jennings. The rage in his eyes was a white-hot nova. "And you worthless, arrogant child, you put your hands on him." Jennings was trembling, his face the color of ash. "Sir, I didn't know," he stammered. "You didn't know?" The Admiral roared, his voice finally breaking its restraint, a clap of thunder that shook the chandeliers. "Your job is not to know. Your job is to show respect, to honor the legacy of those who came before you. You looked at this man, and you saw a frail, old man in a cheap suit. You saw weakness. You saw insignificance. You looked, but you did not see." He jabbed a finger into Jennings's chest, forcing him back a step. "You saw his hands, and you didn't see the hands that disarmed a bomb with 2 seconds on the clock in Beirut. You saw his stoop, and you didn't see the back that carried a wounded comrade 3 miles through a jungle. You saw his age, and you didn't see the wisdom that outsmarted colonels and generals when he was just a sergeant. You, Lieutenant Commander, are a disgrace to that uniform." The public humiliation was absolute. Every person in the room was a witness. "Marine," the Admiral snapped, not taking his eyes off Jennings. One of the guards stepped forward. "Sir, escort this officer to my office. He is to be confined there. He is relieved of all duties, effective immediately. His career in the United States Navy is over." I will personally see to it that his discharge is filed before sunrise. Sir, yes, sir. The Marine guard took Jennings by the arm, his grip like iron. Jennings didn't resist. He was a hollow shell, his arrogance and pride stripped away, leaving only shame. As he was led away, his eyes met Elias's for a fraction of a second. He saw no triumph there, no satisfaction, only that same deep, unsettling pity. The disgraced officer and his escort disappeared down a hallway. The lobby remained silent, the guests frozen in place, their faces a mixture of awe, shame, and reverence. Admiral Harrison turned back to Elias, his expression softening once more. Mr. Thorne, Elias, I am so sorry. I should have been here to greet you myself. There is no excuse. Elias Thorne finally spoke, his gravelly voice cutting through the thick silence. He is young, Charles. The young are often blind. They see the vessel, not what it contains. He looked at the Admiral, a faint, sad smile touching his lips. Do not end the boy's career over this. Send him somewhere cold and quiet. Let him learn that strength is not loud. Let him learn humility. It was a grace note, a moment of mercy for the man who had shown him none. The Admiral considered his words, his respect for the old man deepening even further. I will take your counsel under advisement, he said, his voice filled with warmth. Now, please, allow me to escort you in. You are the guest of honor tonight. He offered his arm, but Elias shook his head gently. No, this is your world now. These are your people. My time for nights like this is long past. He looked around the opulent lobby at the beautiful people in their perfect uniforms, and he seemed to see right through them to a different time and place. I just came because you asked, Charles. It was good to see you. Without another word, he turned and began to walk toward the main entrance. He did not limp, but his steps were slow, deliberate. As he walked, a path cleared for him. No one spoke. No one moved. Captains, commanders, and admirals stood aside, their hands rising and silent, uncertain salutes to a man who had no rank. They were saluting a legend. They were saluting a ghost. He walked out of the golden light of the hotel and into the cold darkness of the night, disappearing as quietly as he had appeared. The silence he left behind was the loudest sound the lobby had ever heard. An epilogue was written in the weeks that followed. Cade Jennings was not discharged. Instead, he was reassigned, just as Elias had suggested. He was sent to a remote weather station in Thule, Greenland. His duties consisted of monitoring meteorological equipment and chipping ice off a satellite dish. He spent 2 years in the silent, frozen dark, with nothing but his shame and the wind for company. He returned a different man, quieter, humble. He never reached the heights he once dreamed of, but he became a good officer, a man who listened more than he spoke. Admiral Harrison instituted a new mandatory training program for all junior officers. It was a history course focusing on the unwritten, unsung heroes of the service. It was officially designated the Valor in Anonymity program, but everyone in the Navy knew its real name. They called it the Thorne Mandate, and Elias Thorne. He returned to his small, quiet life. He lived in a modest house with a small garden. He volunteered at the local library, repairing old books. His hands, which had once defused bombs and saved the world, were now gentle with brittle paper and faded ink. He never spoke of his past. He never attended another ball. He remained a ghost, a quiet legend walking unseen among the living, perfectly content in the peaceful world he had fought so hard and so secretly to protect. For true honor is not found in the thunder of applause, but in the silence of a duty faithfully done.